haven't made a video in quite a bit, mainly because I've just either been at work or grinding some other formats for Vanguard or grinding Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess I'll fill you in on what I've been playing in Premium for the last couple months. Ever since the Premium collection came out, I saw a very specific card that I felt I was able to either break or optimize in a way where it would perform the best it possibly could, and that was Heltruda. I tested like every single interaction in Bermuda with this card, and what I found out is that this card is not an engine in itself. It is more so a out that you can play to if you just happen to be able to go into it. This card is incredibly easy for your opponent to deny, given they are aware of just how to play the game. There are ways to grind your opponent's hand out incredibly easily, and this card as an engine doesn't really do much. So while I think this deck is very solid and very resilient, I don't think Heltruda as an objective for the deck is something that is actually worth building for. This card isn't necessarily a thing that you should be building for, rather it is a win more card that you should be able to go into in an engine that already works on its own, which is the primary flaw of the deck I decided to play with it. Now, in a vacuum, Heltruda, yes, Highlander works very well with Heltruda. However, Highlander can work very well on its own, and it has its own win cons that it doesn't necessarily need a discard 3 to go into just to win the game. However, a deck that this card enables and definitely makes exist slightly more than it used to is Prism. And what I did with Prism was I basically tested the shit out of it for the last couple months, and I tried to make it work around this stride. And the issue with that, naturally, is that this stride is like favorite champ. You will be able to go into it once every 5 games, but it is not something you should be relying on for your main strategy. But once this card is out, and you're able to pay the discard 3 and do everything for this card, you are a turn ahead of your opponent at all times. The issue is getting there, and getting there is something that I didn't think was worth building around because this seems like more of a win more card. What does Bermuda have that Highlander doesn't, that you're able to take advantage of in a deck like Prism? You're able to play 4-ofs, which is very important for a couple of reasons. First off is that the cards that Highlander plays 1 of are incredibly aggressive and just like value cards. That like, the second you draw 1 of them, you get a lot of value out of it. But if you're able to play 4, like imagine the value you get out of that. So like, I took those and I'm like, what decks can I play those in that I'm able to get the most value out of while also still progressing the game state? So I took a look at Anj. Anj didn't even work very well with this card, and without this card, Anj can't really close a game out. We have things like Shizuku, which is more of a high roll deck. I might make a profile on that later this week. Grade 3s, we have 4 Prism Image Vert. This card gets us the most advantage and also the most aggression in our combos. There are a lot of reasons to play the Prism engine over other things. The primary one that I decided to go with is that, yes, Lupina does get you just as many attacks. Yes, Anj can, on a high roll, get you just as many attacks. Highlander, even. Highlander does the same thing, gets you arguably more advantage depending on how far in your combos you are. The thing with Prism is, I play Highlander. I know that Highlander's bricks are bad, but they are not unplayable. Whereas this deck's bricks are still able to grind out like 3 or 4 damage early and still tank a first stride turn. Like, yeah, you can get like your full combo double Pearl Sister swings on turn 3, you can do it with Heltruda, yeah, all of that is absolutely true. The thing with Lupina is, it does not get any card advantage. And Bermuda, after you're discarding 3 for Heltruda, your hand size is entirely dependent on what engine you play. If you are playing something like Anj or Lupina and you pay the cost for Heltruda, you better be damn sure you're winning the game that turn, or else you end on like a 6-card hand, which isn't living anything. This deck, on average, if you're able to full combo Heltruda, you're ending on a bare minimum of like 11 cards, which doesn't seem that good, but like, that's the minimum. You average around 15 to 16 cards in hand at the end of your turn, so long as your full combo resolves. As opposed to Highlander, whose 15 to 16 card hand is full of 5k shields and cards that do not interact, this deck, all of your grade 1s, grade 2s, anything, not only have more shield, but are also able to just disrupt your opponent to the point where their full combo turn turns into just a push turn. Vert is also here because it works very well with one of our strides that we go to on a low roll. Something else that I find is very important is against something like Nightmare Dolls. If we are grade 2 gaming them and they ride up and ride down to grade 2, we can ride into Vert and just use it as a turn to farm advantage. So we can bind our clears, we can get extra drive checks, we can draw cards. An issue Heltruda has is that it will start your combos off with very tiny numbers, usually averaging around the 20s or 15s. Once you're able to get your pieces, you hit a bare minimum of like 30k lines, which are absolutely better than any other deck can usually average out, like even Coral on a high roll. They get either their Force Marker Coral or their Stride Coral. Either one will have big numbers at the start, but then their numbers afterwards will be a lot smaller, which naturally you're not hitting over defensives. Anj even, like, they're decent, but the Anj itself doesn't get you enough card advantage to justify you running it as its own deck. Vert is, I still think, the only card where you're able to do just the perfect amount of offense and defense while also like having a functional deck. And that is all our grade 3s. We're not even playing Nectaria. I tried Nectaria. I know a lot of people are on it, but the thing is, Nectaria is a card that we need to use as a combo starter that gets us into our Heltruda. And the issue with that is that we have to naturally go -1 just to resolve it. You can actually full combo with just one card in bind and be totally fine. And naturally, the other card that gets us our pieces in bind is Rosa. Yes, okay, I understand. Rosa's a counterblast. And a lot of people are able to just straight up deny this deck a lot of plays early by just not giving us CB. Like one of our best cards in our deck. It basically, once we resolve all of our effects with our bind zone, this card gets us a +2. It's just too good not to play. Also, just calling her out of bind gives our front row a 10k buff, which is amazing. It lets us hit over defensives. One of the very few cards that lets Heltruda combos keep going that high power. For Lieselot, this is absolutely mandatory. I see people constantly, that I've been theory crafting this deck with, take out a copy of it, but I honestly think 4 is a mandatory ratio in this deck. There is no reason to play less than 4 of this. This is our entire early game. Call this turn 1, get a card, ride Aqua, bounce call it, everything that Bermuda naturally does. You can call this off of your G-Guards on opponent's turn, top card in. You have another card to bounce with Heltruda, which is essentially another draw. Then next turn, because it stayed on the field and it activated last turn, you can then go into Heltruda, bounce call it again, top deck another card, you can bounce that card with Vert. You essentially use this card to go +2 in the time span of, like, basically 1 turn. Of Lieselot's best friend, Aqua. Aqua is just, like, straight up crazy in this deck. Your early game is nuts because of this card, because of your grade 3 searcher, because of Lieselot. You can constantly recycle Lieselots and just constantly plus cards in the early game. You can use this on opponent's turn to bounce your stride fodder that you might have happened to call out of bind with Vert. Just a mandatory card. Never go under 4 of this. 2 Sandy. Now, I have some strange reasoning for this, but it boils down to this. With the full combo decks in the format, Shirayuki, Nightmare Dolls, Spike Brothers, even Grand Blue at times, if they're high rolling into Bartholomew, they can get quite a bit of attacks. If you call Hanali out and pass, you have more of these to not only Dismal, but you have a higher chance of Hanali plus Dismal in the battle phase to basically just shut down your opponent's turn. If you end on Hanali, which I'll show in a few seconds, they will usually go into Beatrix. If they don't go into Beatrix, they will either sit on grade 3 or they will go into a play that will plus them cards so that they're able to full combo you next turn. What you do with these is you make sure that you have at least 2 ways to G-Guard at all times. You don't show them that you have Hanali, but when they go into an aggressive play, you go Hanali Dismal battle phase, and they have already committed to a very specific line of play that if they're not able to fully execute it, they will either fall over, or it is very hard for them to get back and play again next turn. Having Yu-Gi-Oh! Style hand trap ratios in Bermuda is honestly the thing that makes this deck as resilient as it is. Any deck with some form of disruption like this, a lot of people will choose to rush earlier, because if you're not able to push as much damage late game because of Hanali, you kind of have to deal them more damage early. And if they know that we are playing these ratios, we have damage early. Guess what that means? We now have enough counterblast to go full combo and set up our bind zone. 4 copies of Sedna. This card is absolutely mandatory, not just because it is a 13k booster, but not just because it is a 13k booster, not just because we only play 4 grade 3s in this deck that we want to ride, but also because we need heal guards in a lot of matchups. There are some decks that have Overlord Syndrome, as I like to call it, where if they high roll and they get their full combo off turn 3, you just straight up die. A Mystery Flare is the biggest example of this. Card is honestly, like, card needs to get banned, but like, a heal guard can help us on one of the turns of their 2 to 3 extra turns. This boosting Aqua is a 28k without a force marker. Like, that is straight up crazy. Turn 2, for clear. Again, Prism, it gets us our pieces early if we ride it. We have another shot of getting our Vert. Also, when we call it off of Bind, if our opponent's damage denying us and we ride up to Vert, or even go into our stride that lets us copy Vert, and we get this out, we're able to just draw another card and get a nice column in if we really need it. It is one of the ways that Vert is able to just plus us 3 free cards every single turn, and is, again, just another reason why the Prism engine is just so valuable in conjunction with Ultruda. This is, like, to some people spice, to some people very obvious. Like, yeah, naturally, it's Prism, you need countercharge, there's a Prism countercharger, it's searchable, cool, right? Here's the thing, though. If we have 1 damage, and we used it on clear, and we have this plus Aqua, what we can do is we can bounce this countercharge, and if our opponent either doesn't know the matchup or is forced to push us early, if we already have 1 open counterblast, what is 2 gonna do, right? Here's the thing about that. Even if they know the matchup, that can sometimes just be enough of a player trap to get us into our full combo. If we are at 1 damage and we get to 2, and we are able to call this back next turn, bounce it again, countercharge, we don't just get Vert, we don't just get Heltruda, but we also get Vert, Heltruda, and occasionally another Rosa Search, which might just get us into another attack, which is really good. Also, with the new G-Guard, we're able to bounce this, not only get shield, but add 4k power to our Vanguard. It makes us a weird Excel number. It hits us to 17, which isn't the best, but like, sometimes it just gets us that much power and it lets us live a little easier. I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I need a 4th of this. I have a 4th, I just didn't decide to play it. The issue with Hanali in this format is that in the main phase, a lot of decks can pop it. They can Dexter into Dolls, pop it. Shirayuki even can go into Hardy, which they have the option to play, and just pop it in the main phase. Dolls can't, but we usually steamroll Dolls anyways. It is a 3-card combo to live a lot of these combo decks turns. Once we get it off, we win the game. The issue is that 3-card combo is sometimes harder to get, but not as hard as other Bermuda decks because we're playing Prism, and Prism just gains a lot of card advantage. It's one of the many reasons this deck just steamrolls Spike Brothers. Then finally we got Flash Sapphire. This used to be the Prism that did not have this effect. Prism Duo Arya, because it could guard a non-Prism Vanguard. This one only guards a Prism Vanguard. We would always go up against Mega Colony, which was not only already our worst matchup, but we had ways of winning the game as long as we were able to ride heal guards, and this cannot PG heal guards. This can only PG Prism names, and that screws us over in the bug matchup. This and Arya are both searchable Prism Perfect guards. The value of this one, naturally, is its second skill. You, from drop zone, bind it, choose the Limit Break 5 ability of your Vanguard, which, again, you choose as much as possible, so if your Vanguard is Heltruda, it doesn't have one, so, like, who cares? And it becomes Limit Break 4, which, like, whatever. It matters if you're choosing your other Stride Garnet. You can bind it off of Heltruda, and congratulations, you now have a 2nd card in bind to go full combo with. You can swing with this, bounce it next turn, and boom, you got a PG also. 3 other draws. I wanted to play as many crits as possible. I also wanted to play searchable PGs that gave us bind zone, so Flash Sapphire is pretty important for that. Draws are also very good in this deck because a lot of the time we are missing a couple extra cards for our full combo, and draws get us there. I know in a vacuum you want to play a lot of draws in this deck, but you honestly just need the crits. You're not able to finish games as easily as something like Shirayuki is, so crits are a lot more important here. 4 of our stride crits, very, very important. We don't play that many grade 3s, and we want to stride, so naturally we play these. Most slept on card of the deck is Ardell. This card actually enables a lot of our combos. If we don't have enough pieces to full combo, and we want to get as many attacks out as possible, we can either call this on a force marker to swing for 14, or put it behind something to hit a magic number. When our Vanguard attacks, shove this into the soul first, draw our last card, which allows us to discard 3, and then go full combo. Another really important thing that comes up in a lot of grind game matchups, especially against Mega Colony, is that if we are striding something like Tirua, and we are bottom decking something, and we have Ardels on the field. What we can do is we can hold the Ardels if we are on a low deck count. Let's say we have 5 cards in our deck. We have 2 Ardels. We can hold these Ardels for this play, so that once we do our first triple drive with Tirua, we can bottom deck 3. When Tirua swings, we then shove Ardels into Soul, and our next drive check is guaranteed to be whatever else we bottom deck. 4 heals, you need them. Grade 3s, searchable, heal guards, they let you live. They also give you counterblast if they leave you at 0, and then you're able to call this, get a damage, bounce it back to hand, and you have a G guard for next turn. Over trigger, you know the drill. They need to be banned. Starter, Shizuku. I was actually playing Shiratsuyu for the countercharge, but it's not searchable, and I'd rather have a searchable countercharger, so I just cut it for late. So we have 2 Heltrudas. This is the main finisher of the deck. If we have the option to just full combo on Heltruda, we will absolutely take it. This does cost 3 discards, which is very steep sometimes. However, our Prism engine, after we are discarding these 3, is able to get us enough advantage to where this card is actually letting us go like +5 to +6. I was originally on 2 of these, but I decided to play 4 Garnets. Garnet is a very interesting card. It's not as good as like Crystal Luster or Chain Ranker, because it's only able to copy 1 ability, but it is still very good. We can stride this, either get the drive check effect, or get the extra attack effect of Vert. It all depends on how much damage we feel safe giving our opponent, but both skills are very good. If we're able to somehow farm Verts and get force markers, we can just get 3 really big crit swings just to push game. We usually go into it if we are fairly behind and it's just able to farm us a couple extra cards, which is not bad. Tirua, pretty standard. I want to go to 2 of this. Against DP, this matters. Against bugs, this absolutely matters. The issue is, against DP and bugs, usually we only are able to survive enough to go into 1 of it, because they'll usually kill us the next turn with like Malignantis. I would probably cut some Garnets to go to 2 of this, but whatever, 1 is fine. Megan actually comes up sometimes. If we're really down bad on cards, and we have the extra stride fodder, this gets us almost as many attacks as Heltruda, which caps at 8. This caps at 6, however, this can sometimes just be better because it requires less commitment. This will usually come up when we're about to deck out. This deck actually decks out very often. Balan Arena, this card rarely comes up, but it comes up sometimes. Against things where you won't have a hand, like Nazari Kagero, or other decks like Nubatama even sometimes, like, you have a good matchup against both of those decks, but like this can help you get free stride, as well as if we plussed off of Heltruda, and we have a ton of cards in hand, and we know our opponent doesn't have that many PGs, we can just drop this down and just, like, win the game on the spot. This deck does run 15 grade 1s and 12 grade 0s, so we're able to go into this if we need to. This is the main card that gets us into our disruption, Citron. It just reads, when you guard her, call a card from hand. If you called one, she gets 10k shield. We can drop down a late, then bounce it with another G-guard to get defensive power. We can call down Hanali mid-battle phase and basically stop our opponent's turn on the spot. We can call down Lieselot, so we're able to get another card the turn before we go full combo with it, so then Lieselot next turn is still live. We can call Aqua to bounce a piece we might need to stride next turn. We can also just call Sedna to search a grade 3 on opponent's turn. The other thing that's also very important is, against Narukami, if they have a front row full of Zuitens, and you have this, you can drop something in the front row and all of their Zuitens turn off. There are also times where you need a second of this, but I'm usually fine with 1. This is our 0 counterblast way of bouncing things to hand, like late or vert or anything we might want to use later. I honestly don't think this card is too good, but it comes up sometimes. This card actually doesn't do much against Aquaforce, despite it being kind of the matchup that everybody thinks of with this card. Dismal, 1 is a good minimum. Sometimes I needed 2 Dismal just because I wanted 2 turns of Hanali Dismal. 2 Sandy, I think 2 is the bare minimum you need to play. I think 2 is mandatory. Against DP, you can drop 2 of these and usually 2 to pass their Vanguard. Also, if you had just done Heltruda, this card can get huge. If you're thinking about building this deck, I would advise you to not build it. This deck sucks in this upcoming format. Aquaforce doesn't care about Hanali. In the battle phase, Aquaforce still doesn't care about Hanali. If you're thinking about building this, take this video with a grain of salt.
Good morning, my son is amazing. He look Korean, but he dance like MJ. He only in pre-K.